Transition healthcare in India is still an extremely nascent subject. It is still what I would call as at infancy state. Whereas in the US, Western Europe, and Australia and New Zealand, it's a very, very evolved market. In India, the healthcare itself is gone through multiple phases. The last 3 decades, we have seen a large growth in what I would call as acute care and tertiary care hospitals. In the last about 15 years, we've seen the emergence of single specialty players. And the last 5 years, we've seen emergence of home health care. And transition care is the next horizon, which is just happening right now. I think it's absolutely necessary because, like I said, it's a nascent one in Indian perspective. So therefore, if we draw some parallels from the most mature healthcare economy, which is US, in the US, if you see the healthcare spend is almost 18% of the GDP, which is one of the highest in the world. And out of the entire healthcare spend, a good 12% is actually spent on what is called as post-acute care or post-hospitalization. And within the 12% again, a good 7% is spent on what is called as transition care, which is largely a combination of in-house rehabilitation facility and skilled nursing facility. So if you look at just the transition care, the size in the US is about $34.4 billion. And the reason it is very important is because of statistical evidence we are seeing today. Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center has reported that when there is a patient who is discharged from hospital and goes through proper transition care, their readmission rate comes down by 50%. Similarly, Medicare data across the country has shown statistically that when people go out of a hospital, go through transition care and then go home, their recovery rates are much better and their readmission rates fall down dramatically. So from a prognosis and recovery of the individual's perspective, transition care is absolutely necessary and it's a proven model. It is just that India is lagging behind the globe in terms of healthcare, and therefore transition care for us is just emerging. But I see this as a very good growth impetus in the near future. So we have started SuVitas Holistic Healthcare about a year ago, and about 4 months back we opened the doors to serve the first of the patients. In our case, we don't call anybody as patient, we call everybody as resident, because these people come to us and they generally tend to stay for multiple weeks. So we don't want to use the word patient at all. So what is unique about what we bring to transition care in the Indian perspective, because we are the first organized transition care facility in the country. What we do is essentially global best practices which are brought in as protocol-based care. Second is it's very personalized and highly customized for individual requirement. The individual, the family, the background they come from, what kind of a challenge are they facing through in life today, what kind of socio-economic situation do they come from, what kind of a home or family background they come from is what we do, a very personalized care plan. We do a very, very home-like environment so that they feel relaxed, they feel energetic, and they feel it's a very vibrant environment. So we bring in physician care, we bring in nursing care, we bring in physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, diet and nutrition, and emotional counseling. So if you had to say in a quick nutshell, I would say that we take care of the physical, the mental, the medical, the emotional, and the spiritual care for a person who has just come out of a hospital and help them to get back to as much of a functional level as what they were prior to their injury or prior to their illness. So market opportunity again is quite large. If I draw a parallel from the US, in the US it's about 7% of the overall healthcare spend is in transition care alone. And in Indian perspective, we spend about 1.4% of our GDP is spent on healthcare at this stage. And if I use the same parallel on healthcare spend, we're talking about a $1.449 billion market size as far as transition care is concerned at the current rate of spending. But given the current government's focus on healthcare, there is a likelihood that the spending may increase. And since the transition care market size is a derivative of the overall healthcare spend, this $1.5 billion I'm talking about is likely to increase as well. Our growth plans, we have just started the first facility in Hyderabad. We're a 50-bed capacity. In the last 4 months, we've taken care of and helped about 35 residents so far. And our intent is to next look at Bangalore and Mumbai. But in the next 24 to 30 months, we would like to go across the country and build close to a 2,000 bed capacity. So the challenges are multifold. One, if you look at the IRDA data for the country, it says that only about 16.7% of the people across the country are covered by some kind of health insurance, right? And there is some beyond that where the corporates may do as reimbursement. But largely 75 to 80% of the healthcare spend in the country today is out-of-pocket spend. So therefore, when people are having a healthcare emergency and they go into a hospital, the propensity and willingness to spend is quite high. When it comes to transition care, it will take some time for the people to understand the value it brings on the back of the hospitalization, and therefore the propensity for spending out of pocket is, I would say, at this stage a little lower, and that will change over a period of. That's one challenge I see. The second challenge we also see is that at this stage, for a very large population that we have, the trained manpower that we have in the healthcare system is very limited. And when it comes to transition care, it's almost non-existent. So for our first facility in Hyderabad, we actually hired qualified and experienced people. Yet we ran all of them through almost a 4-week orientation and training program to make them aligned to what is called as transition care's requirements. So for us to grow and scale across the country, training and orienting becomes a very, very important aspect for us. So which means that we will evolve our own training standards, our own training certifications, and we'll have to actually create a very strong hiring and training model across the country. In terms of the trends, there are two different paradigms I would look at it. One paradigm is more from the investment perspective. So like I said a little while ago, on the investment side, we've seen heavy investments going into tertiary care hospitals in the past. Last 15 years, we've seen in single specialty. Last 5 years, we're seeing a lot into home health care. In the last 2 years, we're also seeing some amount of creeping investments into more like wearable devices and mobile applications. So transition care, again, is inevitable that they're going to see a lot of investments coming in. The second paradigm I would like to talk about is in terms of how the Indian culture and the geography is slowly evolving. Because when we look at SuVitas and the transition care largely, we think there are 4 segments of people who will benefit the most. The first segment is urban population, where both spouses are working. The nuclear family, both spouses are working. Somebody in the family falls sick. They can take time off from the office for maybe like 4 or 5 days or whatever. But when it's a long drawn 2 months, 3 months, 5 months recovery, it's a huge burden for both the spouses to figure out a way to stay at home. So for them to look at an institution like SuVitas, where it gives a holistic care, is a boon. So we see that the nuclear families are going to be one large segment which will leverage our services. The second segment is what we call as aging parents living in India, and all the children are abroad. And therefore, when something goes wrong with their parents in India, they rush back from wherever they are, and then they spend a week, 2 weeks, and then they have to go back to their life. And they again struggle to see, how do I leave my parent in safe hands, where I can be assured that their care is taken care of. That's the second segment. The third segment is, in India today, tertiary care or quality acute care is largely a focus area within the metros and at most a few tier 2. So in India today, if you see for every 100 patients that come to tertiary care hospital, a good 50% of them actually travel about 100 kilometers on average just to get access to quality care. And when these people come into metros, for them the challenge is, do I go back to my hometown? Do I stay over here? If I stay over here, where do I stay? Should I look for some of my relatives' place, or should I look at some guest house, service apartment? It's a major trauma for them. So for them again, getting a quality healthcare, transition care is very important. The fourth segment is medical tourism. While it's still a small segment right now, I think we have about 250,000 people come as medical tourists into the country, but that is expected to grow to almost 500,000 a little after 2020. And when they come into India, they spend about a week, 10 days, maybe 12 days in the hospital, but they had to stay in the country for almost a month for their follow-up reviews. Now, where do they stay today? Today, they're all struggling in hotels, lodges, service apartments, and whatnot. So that's the fourth. So these are the 4 segments, more from a need perspective, which we think will be the ones which will leverage our services the most.